Will you give me a thought on this third-party candidacy of RFK Jr. and the addition, and I guess it's just another way to get into the zeitgeist for the news cycle of the day. They bring in Aaron Rodgers on his short list of Veep.
Aaron Rodgers for vice president. Nothing has sounded as silly since Curtis LeMay ran with George Wallace. I mean, how do you become a serious, creditable candidate for president and suggest this person for vice president? It's crazy.
Yeah. Now to the testimony yesterday, the Robert Hur testimony, which was full of, this is the mishandling of the classified documents case, just obviously people I think are aware of this, but so Biden's mishandling of the classified documents, Robert Hur was a special counsel. He decided there be no charges levied against Joe Biden, but he, in summary, essentially suggested that Biden couldn't remember a lot of things like the when his son died, et cetera, when transcripts essentially reflected that Biden very well recalled those things.
Yeah, don't confuse people with the facts. The people who want to get Joe Biden are going to use everything they can. I think Mr. Hur made a serious error in judgment, but as he admitted on the stand, he is a Republican. He is a partisan. It's okay. The American people understand it. I don't think, aside from Republicans, that the Hur report will have any difference at all.
Well, let me just push back a little bit on the general notion that this was a hit job. Now, I think he...
No, I didn't say it was a hit job. Sorry. I didn't say it was a hit job. And if you read the report, which I have tried to do, I haven't read everything, but I've read a good part of it, Joe Biden comes out looking pretty good. So
yeah, well, he actually says, Hur does, to Biden, he says, wow, you have a photographic memory for so many of these things. So he actually pays the president a compliment in the conversation. It's right there in the transcript. That's never noted in the summary, of course.
No, of course not.
But when I say push back, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say push back on you. There is a narrative out there that it was a hit job. And I think in part, there is some truth to the fact, as we've just said, that you know, this guy wrote a partisan report. He cherry-picked facts. He left other stuff out. But he didn't charge Biden with anything. I think that has kind of been lost in the conversation. If it were really a hit job, there would have been charges.
Look, you're absolutely right. It's a sad commentary, and we're just going to have to move on. The attacks on Joe Biden, and by the way, when he was asked directly, Mr. Hur, about whether Biden was senile, he said that's not what it says in the report. Joe Biden, you can criticize him for many things, but I watched that State of the Union, and he was with it. He was sharp. He responded, and his age can be held against him by people who want to hold age against someone. But are they going to hold it against Trump? Did you see Jerry Nadler played a series of clips of Donald Trump making serious errors in his commentary? This is going to be a down and dirty campaign. I'm an expert on American political campaigns for the presidency. I've reviewed so many aspects of those campaigns. Already, it's the dirtiest campaign we've ever had, and it's going to get a lot worse.
Now then to campaign-related things like the primaries, primary in Georgia, et cetera. Now you've got both of the main candidates for the respective parties having clinched nominations. I wonder if you can speak to what might have been revealed in those returns beyond the clinching of the candidates.
There are people who won't vote for Trump under any circumstances. His big problem, Trump's big problem, is that there are a core of people, I would say, and I'm guesstimating now, about 15 to 20% of Republicans who won't vote for him. He can't win the election without those Republicans. And every day he digs the hole even deeper with his repeated blasts at the president. So my sense is, and I still believe this, and we'll see if I'm right or wrong. I've been wrong before, I can assure you. I think President Biden or an alternative Democratic candidate will defeat Donald Trump under any circumstances.
I guess what I'm getting at with the question too, John, is that Georgia was a key state. That's why he had that call to Georgia officials, Secretary of State and others, actually, to kind of strong-arm them with the 11,780 votes. I wonder if you can speak to Georgia specifically, because it's a narrow margin of victory here in so many of these swing states.
Take a look at the Georgia vote, Mark, and you can see that if Trump can't hold those Republicans in Georgia who insisted on not voting for Trump, he cannot carry Georgia.
And so this is interesting too. I wonder if you think that this Middle East situation is affecting. I'm seeing in the chat now that Gaza is a problem, et cetera. I don't know to what extent that gets onto
Well,
Biden.
There's a backlash. Look, what's happening in Gaza is tragic, brought on by Hamas and its actions. But look, this morning at San Francisco International Airport, at the international terminal, there was a protest that shut down the international terminal by the pro-Palestinian forces. And look what happened at Zellerbach Auditorium in Berkeley just the other day, where an Israeli speaker was shut down by pro-Palestinian protesters who proceeded to smash windows in Berkeley. There was a march yesterday against violence. I'm in favor of free speech. I have no problem with the Palestinians or the pro-Israeli forces speaking out. I think it's a good thing that people have that right to exercise their freedom of speech. But I'm opposed to violence by anybody on any side. And I think there is a backlash taking place. The backlash is that many people who are very sympathetic to the tragedy in the Middle East are now saying to Hamas and their supporters, you can't do it this way. And I think that's important. Look, Mark, the most stunning thing to me was after the Israelis made the argument that the UNRWA people, who are supposed to be there representing the UN on a humanitarian basis, what did they find? They found that the Hamas command headquarters was located underneath the UNRWA headquarters. And there are several nations who cut off their support to UNRWA because of that reason. But the issue really is, and I say this as a bottom line, the issue is, does Israel have a right to exist? And the Hamas forces say a two-state solution isn't what they want. They want the destruction of Israel. That isn't going to happen. And I can assure you that the Israelis are not going to roll over. They're going to fight back. And some of the tactics they use, as occurs in every war, including wars we, the United States, fight, are not pleasant. No one, and particularly I can say this as talking to friends in Israel, even people who are on the left, no one is happy with what has been wrought in Gaza. But again, you have to consider why. And October 7th should not be forgotten. It should be understood. By the way, we found out yesterday that another American died on October the 7th. We know that the Hamas could end all of this by simply releasing the hostages. The president really thought that for Ramadan, there would be some sort of a deal. Hamas refused. And that's the problem. It's not a rational discussion. Please understand me. It's not a rational discussion. It is an emotional discussion. But we'll see how it plays out.
Kim?
I had a question earlier from a listener, viewer, and it's a perfect question for you, John Rothmann, because now we know that President Biden and Trump are the presumptive nominees for their parties. Have we ever had a matchup of the same candidates twice in a row like this?
Yes, Eisenhower and Stevenson, 1952 and 56 is the last time.
Wow, come on with that.
I knew he'd know. That's right.
You want to play for the big money, or you want to go home with what we've already awarded you?
Let me assure you, that's a softball kind of question. But let me remind everybody,
Rothmann smack talking. That's nothing. Come on, bring a real question to me.
Eisenhower defeated Stevenson by a large margin in 52, a larger margin in 56. And I think, and I say this not as a partisan, I've really tried to analyze numbers. I think Donald Trump is headed for a massive defeat. And that defeat is going to be in large measure because people who voted for him in the past won't vote for him now. And I think the Republican Party, the big question, Mark, which you and I will be talking about next year at this time, I believe, is how the Republican Party rebuilds. And let me point out to you that his only opponent, who just suspended her campaign, Nikki Haley, has made clear she's not sure who she's going to vote for. And that's a big blow to Donald Trump.
Again, I've been back and forth on not that it's a huge deal, but the Haley thing as to how she would, she's not going to support Biden. So it would be a question of whether she endorses anyone or she,
She will not run as a third-party candidate. She made clear to No Labels who intends to nominate someone. They haven't indicated who that will be yet. She has said she will not run. Joe Manchin has said he won't run. And I want to remind people, a third-party candidacy like a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is critical only if you're on the ballot. And right now, Bobby Kennedy Jr. is on the ballot in 6 states. And frankly, I think the challenge for Joe Biden is to hold those Democrats. I think that Bobby Kennedy Jr. does more damage to Donald Trump. And we'll have to see how those numbers turn out. And you and I will be analyzing that all through November. But let me just point out, the desperation of the campaign is indicated by who he's considering for vice president. And let me assure you, that's how George Wallace went down in 68. He had about 20% of the vote. He took Curtis LeMay. LeMay spoke irrationally about the use of nuclear weapons, and that was the end of George Wallace's serious candidacy. Bobby Kennedy Jr. has to understand who is vice president matters, and he should understand that better than anybody, given his father's interaction with Lyndon Johnson.
Oh, wow. That's a great point, too. So this is an interesting comment. I don't know if I can read it. It is...
John Rothmann, about 497,000 people voted for Trump in Georgia. About 275,000 voted for Biden. How can the Democrat win in November?
The Dems take Georgia in November. Yeah.
The answer is, don't judge how a primary, number of people who turn out for a primary. Primaries generally turn out lower numbers. What will matter is the general election. Remember, Biden was virtually unopposed in Georgia. There was no real motivation to go to the polls. But look, your listeners, who are extremely sharp, obviously, because they listen to you and me, we're going to be analyzing these numbers. I think Mark and I in September, October, into November are going to really be analyzing numbers. We're going to be analyzing polls. I don't know if our segments will be longer, but certainly they are going to be vital to understanding what's happening. Right now, if it's a head-to-head, I think that Biden wins. And I think the reason he wins is not because people love him overwhelmingly. It is because people don't want Trump. And the answer is people don't just vote for, they vote against. But we'll see. I've been wrong before, but I just don't think I'm wrong on this one.
I think increasingly, this is a really great point you make. Increasingly in this society, and I really see it on social media, anybody who is in this world that we're in now, YouTube, social media platforms,
TikTok.
X, whatever, TikTok. And I'll get to TikTok in a second from a policy standpoint. But you see how hate or dislike actually motivates and propels in a much more efficient way than does, no, I kind of like that guy. No, I kind of don't like that guy, or guy generically. That really motivates action far more than sort
Absolutely,
of just
100%. I was at a dinner party Friday night. I think maybe they're listening at this very moment with people who are big Trump supporters. And when I raised the question of January 6th, when I raised the dispute now going on between Mark Levin and Liz Cheney, when I raised all of these issues, it didn't matter. It didn't matter to them. And I think part of it, and I know I can get criticism for it, I believe the Trump supporters are part of a cult. They aren't thinking rationally or logically. And so,
well, let me say this in defense, in a weird defense, a perverted, crazy defense. Some are in a cult, no question about that. But there's
always been in this country 30 to 35% idiots.
Yes, that's true. But there's another part, probably the people who you circulate with, who are smart, but they are Trumpies for other reasons. They are Trumpies over court decisions. They're Trumpies over single issue stuff. Maybe it's the Middle East. So I see that they're not all just,
they are
low information voters.
No, you're 100% correct. These are high information voters.
Right.
But people are blinded by certain preconceived notions.
Sure.
I just defended Donald Trump on the question of in vitro fertilization. And I said, here I can agree with him. I believe he is right. A woman should have the right to in vitro fertilization, something I've talked about with Kim at some length. And I say this because you don't have to be wrong all the time, or even right all the time, but you have to have selective view of what you're doing. You want to talk about TikTok. I don't want the clock, if you'll pardon the pun, tick
to
down.
TikTok away. So let me ask you about this. You know, it's passing the House, this essentially the forced divestiture on the part of this ByteDance company from TikTok, the Chinese part of TikTok, the Chinese ownership. Where do you stand on this?
I'm opposed to what the House did today. I do not believe, and I've never believed in limiting freedom of expression, pure and simple. Now, let me explain to you. My kids listen to TikTok. I don't, but they give me all of the latest news from TikTok. TikTok is just another vehicle of social media. And I must say, very frankly and honestly, I'm not in favor of censoring Fox or CNN or MSNBC or Mark Thompson for that matter. I believe that you have to be able to make these distinctions. If the government really feels that the TikTok is a danger because of the Chinese Communist Party, then let's talk about it. Let's expose it and let President Biden talk with the Chinese about it. But I'm not in favor of banning anything. I've never been in favor of banning books. But I want to make a comment about something General Kelly said. General Kelly, who was White House Chief of Staff under Donald Trump, said that Trump said, well, you know, Hitler didn't do everything wrong. He did some things right. That should be an automatic disqualifier. And I want to commend to you, this is not a movie show, but go back and listen or watch Judgment at Nuremberg. And you will see an encounter that Spencer Tracy, playing a judge, has in a house which he is given during the trials. And there's a German couple there, and he asks them about the Hitler years. And he says to them, well, tell me. And the woman, the maid, says, well, you know, they did some things right. There were things they did that were right. And of course, from Spencer Tracy's point of view, from the American point of view, from humanity's point of view, whatever Hitler did was wrong in every sense. Now, let me explain to you that if Donald Trump can really say, as General Kelly has said, and by the way, this is not the first time we've heard that Hitler did some things right. And then one of Trump's aides is quoted as saying, well, don't cite Hitler, cite Mussolini. I'm thinking to myself, what have we come to? Any candidate for president who speaks that kind of language has no business near the White House, which is, by the way, the argument being made by many of Donald Trump's aides. They're saying they wouldn't work for him again, and that's the end of it. And may I quickly say about Mark Levin, because understand, these are influential people. I listen to Mark Levin on KSFO, and I listen occasionally to his television program on the weekend. Mark Levin is a powerful spokesman for a particular point of view. And I want to be clear, when he said that Liz Cheney distorted things, had not been forthcoming, suggesting that in fact Donald Trump had called out the National Guard on January 6th, we know that isn't true. And if you want to read a book that I believe stands the test of the ages, Liz Cheney's book, Oath and Honor, is one that I would recommend and in fact require.
Yeah, I've actually heard really good things about it as well.
It's an amazing book. Yeah. An amazing book.
And I'm not a Liz Cheney fan. I'm not
a Liz Cheney fan either.
I'm
not, listen, I would never vote for her, but I have to tell you, she fulfills the courage denomination of a Profiles in Courage Award. So
let me, Tony, I have to ask you because I can't see. Is Katz waiting, or do I have another time for another question with Rothman?
We have time. No Katz yet.
Okay, so
thanks, Tony.
Let me ask you this because I want to go back to your Nazi reference. So, and this ties into TikTok. So you're telling me that if the Nazi Party had a hugely popular social media platform like TikTok, you'd be okay with it?
Yes.
If it's no, wait a minute. But it's owned by an outside.
Yes.
Okay. In this case, it's the Chinese. In this case, it's the Chinese Communist Party that is involved with ByteDance. Okay. Yep. That's the suggestion. So in my example, it's the Nazi Party that's owned by, and then you can fill in the blank. Some country that's not a NATO ally. You know, fill in whatever. Russia, maybe if you want.
Google Holocaust denial. You'll get it all. Google Protocols of the Elders of Zion. You'll get it all. You want to see Jew hatred unvarnished? Go online. I don't believe in censorship. I believe in rebuttal. And I say it again. The greatest tragedy for us is not having a talk radio station where you and I can do this for 3 hours, talk with our listeners.
Agreed. This is not about what is said. This is about data that is mined by the communist regime, it's argued. And so the Chinese Communist Party begins to have a bunch of information on Americans, data
Like
points,
Facebook.
if you will, that
Like
they didn't have before.
Facebook.
It's nothing to do with. Now, you hear a lot about what they're, just like Facebook, exactly right. You hear a lot about what's out there. Well, they're feeding all of this stuff. The feed that comes to Americans isn't the same feed as China, which is true, but it's the data that becomes a security
you
concern.
can't stop data. Look, you want to do a data analysis of your program, Mark, and who's listening? You can do it on my podcast, which now has 150,000 downloads. I can just rubbing it in.
Congratulations.
But I couldn't do it without you. I want you to know that.
Yeah.
But I want people to be aware. That's the kind of world we live in. You want to read a book about it? Read 1984 by George Orwell. We're there. It's here. And that's the reality. Does it scare me? You bet. May I tell you a quick story? So my wife is retiring, and I wrote a beautiful tribute to my wife. And I must say, all due modesty, really spectacular. She, at my suggestion, went to artificial intelligence. And I said, Ellen, do me a favor, put in Herb Cain, as if Herb Cain were writing it. Now, let me tell you something. Herb was an old friend of mine. He was a guest at our home many times. I knew him. I was in his column. Just a great guy.
Yeah, he's a very famous, just for those who don't know San Francisco, very famous San Francisco columnist in San Francisco.
The artificial intelligence did a better job of writing a tribute to my wife than I did. Now, I say this respectfully, but the world is changing. There will be a time, Mark, when what we do will be superfluous because it'll all be done by artificial intelligence. I'm scared of that time, but I think part of what we have to do with TikTok is we have to be aware that the future is here, that this is a reality, that we're going to learn to live with it, and we're going to have to deal with it. So if you're going to ban TikTok, you better ban Facebook, you better ban all the other stuff that comes out, because everybody's mining it, everybody's using it, and that's the problem. But it's also
the quick follow-up I would give you is that attitude will allow the total engulfing of everyone who's on any of these platforms by these companies unfettered, and they will mine data, and that's not cool. So those
I didn't say
Facebook and Google deserve to be completely unregulated and just, as I say, engulf us all, I think that ain't cool.
Let me assure you, I didn't say that. I said we have to figure out methods to expose what these companies do. I don't believe
I think we need to have
censorship.
methods to regulate these companies too. Do you not agree with that?
Well, it depends what you mean by regulation and who's doing the regulating. If Donald Trump were president of the United States, he said he would weaponize the Justice Department. It depends on who's doing it. But we have to be aware. Let me tell you, the abysmal lack of awareness of the American people. When I talk about Donald Trump and we talk about 91 criminal charges against him, I don't know anybody who can recite all 91. Nobody can deal with the cases. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. And that's the problem we face now. I'm terribly concerned about TikTok and artificial intelligence in general. But thank God we can talk about it. And we need to do more talking and more thinking.
Around the Political World with John Rothmann is his podcast. You can find him there daily with a dose of what you've just gotten, political analysis. There it is on screen.
May I say, I am looking forward to joining you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Many of you were not able to qualify for this very limited, exclusive group of people, but you can still support the Mark Thompson program. And I urge you to do it, as I urge you to support Nikki Maduro's program and Kim McAllister. It is so important because the vehicles for expression, which we are talking about now, require these kinds of platforms. By the way, Mark, I wasn't able on Monday to do my podcast because everything went down. I was unable to get it up. It's the first time that has happened, but I can assure you that's one of the other issues that we are all going to be dealing with. And in the meantime, to Mark Thompson, I'll see you tomorrow night, 8 o'clock.
I love it.
Thank you.
Love you, John Rothmann. Thanks, John. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.